Hey everyone, Road to Gasparilla day 15, and today we're going to do an impromptu topic because of the weather. Just a refresher about what to do in cold weather conditions, especially for those in the Florida area that maybe are not so used to this. So as you can see by my dress, it's very cold in central Florida here today. The high temperature where I am at is 45 degrees, which I know for the athletes who I train who maybe are watching this, or just anybody watching this in the northern latitudes, it doesn't sound, I mean, they probably would love that, but it is very, very cold, very windy. You might hear some of the wind around me here today. So I think it's just a great time to remind as I'm filming this, and then again, when this is going to come out, it's projected to be very cold in this general area. So just as a reminder, Gasparilla, February can be warm, February can be very cold in central Florida. So just as a reminder, not only for race day, but also as you're doing your training, definitely be weather aware. Make sure you're planning these things out. Look at it a couple days in advance, and just make sure that you're doing things like not putting your long run in a situation where it might be compromised because of the weather. You're doing a workout that might be compromised because of the weather. Couple things here, like for example, me just being outside right now, I've got 3 layers on. Layers are going to be your friend, especially if you don't have a huge winter coat that's kind of athletically inclined if you're doing some of your training or anything like that. Also, when you are doing it though, just be aware, especially if you're doing a very long run, think that the weather is going to feel about 20 degrees warmer once you get going, because sometimes you can overheat, get too much sweat on you, and now your body temperature can drop just because it's almost was too not quite cold enough for what you've put on, but then you've worked up that sweat, and then maybe you turn into the wind. You know, be aware of where the wind is and everything. So if you kind of go out and the wind is with you and you work up a sweat, you turn around. If you're an out and back kind of person, be aware of where the wind is. If that wind's going to be right at you after you've worked up a sweat, it might be very, very cold as well. So you might even want to change your route a little bit for things like this. A couple other things that, especially if you're a Florida person like myself, or just generally in the Southeast, you might want to try to invest in maybe some throwaway gloves. I have a couple pair that I have with me when I go and do races like Chicago or anything like that. I've run Grandma's Marathon a couple times up in Duluth, Minnesota. Those might come in handy if you're ever out on a run, or particularly saving them for race day, if you want to start with gloves and then ditch those gloves. So something that you're not going to be too upset if you get rid of. Also, I talked about this in a previous video where I was just generally talking about weather, hot and cold, but maybe look to see if you can get some of those athletic sleeves. Those are really good because as it warms up, you can roll them down onto your wrist, and you can still get the benefit of having that warm when you needed it, but then if it warms up on your run, you can kind of slide those down. And all this is obviously very applicable to race day as well. I think when it's also this cold out, it's a great refresher on things like this is definitely flu season. Apparently this flu season has been pretty hard on a lot of areas of the country. As a reminder, you don't get sick because it's cold out. Otherwise you get sick every time you got a little bit of a chill. But you're more likely to get sick for a couple of reasons. Not to get too much into the minutia, but whenever you are having a little bit more cold out, the mucus linings can definitely get a little bit more compromised. Pathogens can get in that way. We get sick because we're exposed to pathogens, not because we get cold. But the mucus linings might be compromised because it's so cold out or dry out, so they can get in that way. You can also get little cracks in other barriers if it's really cold or dry out. So another way that you can get more susceptible to being sick. But also, as we're talking about this, we're about halfway through this series. So if you're getting ready for Gasparilla, your training load and intensity are probably high. You can also get sick because of increased stressors. So an increased stressor is a high level of training. If you're managing all of that, that's great. But if you add on another compounding issue, such as it being very cold out that your body's going to have to deal with, that's another compounding issue. And if you're exposed to those pathogens because some of those barriers like the mucus linings or whatever are a little bit more compromised because it's cold, that's why people get sick. So make sure that you're being very weather aware, that you're not putting yourself in a position to one where you're really uncomfortable or a run gets compromised, but also that you're not going to put yourself in a position to get sick right when you're going to want to really be at your best getting into race weeks, which is not that far away. It's less than a month as I film this, February 21st and 22nd. So just be very weather aware. As I mentioned, it's going to be cold in the Southeast. Again, the big ice storm that kind of rolled through was not that long ago, and it's just now getting to us here in Central Florida. But just please be weather aware. Just make it a habit check what the weather looks like in a few days. And if you have to move some things around, better to do that in your week, maybe change some things up and make sure that you're being successful in that than to put yourself under some undue stress, maybe even put yourself in a position where you're more likely to get sick because you're getting these compounding stressors. Because this is the part of the season where things are, you know, again, less than a month away from the race, your intensity and volume are going to be high. Make sure that all of your hard work is going to where it needs to. And if you have to make a few changes, that's better than just going through with a plan that the weather's not going to allow. So kind of an impromptu one here. Had to do this, going to kind of make a couple adjustments to what my plan was for the road to Gasparilla to make sure we can squeeze this video in at the right time, but I think very topical. It's been an especially cold winter down here. So we'll see what happens as we get closer to race day in terms of being weather aware.